our guests. And this is the first time we've had two guests on at the same time. So I know that doesn't sound that exciting, but there could be some logistical issues we still have to work out about that. Weston Thatcher's been working in the cannabis industry since 2014, which is before the days of legal recreation sales. Are we going to be talking about what you were doing before it was legal?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's pertinent for sure.
Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so you've worked in small mom and pop shops and large multi-state retailers and distribution operations, and he specializes now in the fields of inventory control, retail management, and track and trace operations. And we'll get into what all those things mean in a little bit. And currently Weston's the Vice President of Operations for Supreme Oak Ventures, which holds, and I'm not sure I know what this is, but I'm hoping you guys will tell me, they hold a distribution and type 6 manufacturing license, and they're located in the Bay Area. And then Robbie Sintich, or Robert Sintich Jr., is Chief Operations Officer for Supreme Oak Ventures. And that's the parent company for TELUS Distribution, Mary and Joe Delivery, and all that sort of thing. Robbie was in the U.S. Marine Corps and received a degree in criminal justice, and then he moved to the Bay Area from the Northeast to explore opportunities in the cannabis industry. And he's worked at a number of places, including Harborside Health Center. He's worked in inventory, merchandising, cash handling, and the safety and security area. And I guess you guys are both doing consulting as well for individuals and companies that are interested in this rapidly expanding field, in the cannabis industry. Did I get some of that right, at least?
Yes, sir. It sounds like you did an exceptional job, to be honest with you.
Well, thanks.
On behalf of Supreme Oak, we definitely want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to bring us on here and kind of shine some light into our industry and the ever-evolving challenges that we face. Supreme Oak Ventures is an equity-owned cannabis company. We're headquartered out of Oakland, California. We were one of the first equity programs to be approved by the city. Very exciting to be able to kind of shed light in this industry, but more specifically the knowledge and the education behind it, which is what I truthfully believe is lacking most, not only in the Bay Area, but across the country.
No, that's why you're here. And Golden Gate, not as a plug necessarily, but Golden Gate's really been thinking about, like, what are the different industries that are emerging in the Bay Area? What can we do to help our students get a better understanding of what's going on in the region? And cannabis studies is definitely a growing field, and there are apparently a fair number of opportunities, as a number of organizations and individuals have been, such as yourselves, have been coming here and setting up shop. But it is an industry that's very different from most other industries in that there are several legal gray areas, at least federally speaking, right? This is legal in the state of California, right? So anything we talk about here is not, there's nothing wrong with what we're talking about or anything like that. But I will say that sometimes when I've broached the subject of legal cannabis, people, especially older folks, will sort of make jokes about, like, oh, you're trying to create a buzz about cannabis industry, aren't you? Or something like that. And I guess it's funny the first time. And anyway, but why don't we talk about, some of the real nuts and bolts, because this is a serious industry. Like, how did the two of you, maybe Robbie, you want to start? How did the two of you get involved in the legal cannabis industry?
Sure. Well, that's a great question. And I think that's a great point to make. There's this huge stigma and false understanding behind the industry. So that was, truthfully, growing up on the East Coast, that's something that I kind of grew up around. And maybe not understanding the full scope or benefits to cannabis, just understanding maybe, you take a hit of a joint or smoke a little bit, and, that's about all you're going to get out of it. Once I came out of the military, I really started to look into the medicinal benefits and started understanding the other potentials that cannabis could offer, not only to individuals, but specifically to veterans and people who truly could, benefit from the medicinal sides of it. And once I actually enrolled with my father in a program out of Oaksterdam University, but it was back in Washington, D.C. And that kind of really opened not only my eyes, but I think, my father's as well, into what the cannabis industry could truly be. and how much information is out there that's just not even talked about or, given the light of day. So I think that was a huge driving factor and option that pulled me in, especially while I was studying criminal justice, to be able to say, oh, this is the other side of the sword. As we all understand, there's always two sides. So again, I think, being able to shed the light and to at least open the opportunity to other individuals. When I moved out here, it was a huge, undertaking and definitely a new venture. But I really lucked out and was able to be taken under the wings by some of the greatest individuals and influential people in the industry. Weston Thatcher being one of those. And while we managed, ran alongside and managed the sale team down at Harborside, there's certainly an experience prior to Prop 64 with Prop 215. But yes, you're absolutely right. Federally, even today, as we sit here and talk about it, we're in a legal, quote unquote, legal state with, adult use or as well as medical. But federally, we're still Scheduled 1 controlled substance, which under the guidelines of the feds actually shows there is no medicinal benefit.
All right, so we'll get to that in a moment. I definitely want to spend time just talking about that. But we have to let Weston talk about how we got into industry too.
So yeah, thank you. So I got my start. I prior to entering the cannabis industry, I was an EMT. I was an emergency medical technician. And like several other people, not just stoners, not just like cannabis people. I was somebody who, at the end of the day, had no problem with lighting up a joint and using that as, my way to just sit back and relax. And for the longest time, those two worlds, they had to be separate. It's not something you can talk about, obviously, as an emergency medical technician. And it's really not a subject that you can bring up, as common conversation with any company to this day. And so I was actually at a trade show, a cannabis trade show, just kind of, walking through one day. And it was actually my mom who sent me a text message and said, hey, why don't you look in, see what the opportunities are looking like in the cannabis industry. And it wasn't even until that moment I realized that, wow, I can make a career out of the cannabis industry. I grew up in San Jose, and I'm sure several people know that San Jose back in the late 2010s was a hotbed for cannabis dispensary activity. We had over 100 retailers.
Uh-oh. We might be frozen there for a second. Give him a second. There he is.
Some of the more space in San Jose for a time was very very saturated, and so I found an opportunity to leave the I guess the more serious side of work behind and come into the cannabis space, which I learned pretty quickly is just as serious. It's very fast paced. There's a lot to learn. It's constantly changing. Operations are constantly having to adapt with the changes. And since then, cannabis has always fulfilled my desire for, the artistic side of myself, the scientific portion of it that I like, the retail operations side. It's something that's been very, very stimulating ever since I got into the industry. And I feel very lucky to be here at this point. Great. Representing for Supreme Oak.
Great, thanks. All right, so I just want to. I know the folks who are listening in right now. Some of them are really knowledgeable in the field, and I'm already seeing some questions in the Q&A. And by the way, if anyone has questions, please do post them in the Q&A, which is at the bottom of the screen. But there are some people who are really knowledgeable, and then there's others of us, include myself, who are a little bit less knowledgeable. So this is something that's really only been legal for, I know what you guys have called adult use, or as opposed to medical use, for 3 years. And can you talk about what has happened to allow this to be legal in California?
Sure, absolutely. Well, prior to Prop 64 being passed. Prop 215 was kind of ruling the streets, and that was I would say a shelter and a protection for a lot of the cultivators as well as manufacturers that were in the state. However, it did kind of create a little bit of a gray zone, and it created this lapse in not only regulation, but I'd say more importantly, quality control, which was a big thing, truthfully, that I've seen kind of emerge out of this. And honestly, one of my driving forces and why I think it's so important that we have some sort of testing, at least based at testing, is because the quality control. There's so many different factors and things that people don't even necessarily understand that it may be safe to ingest when you eat it, but when you ingest it in terms of smoking or inhalation, it creates a totally different animal inside your body.
So let me, before you go on, I'm sorry. So Prop 215, that was way back in like 1996 that was passed, right? That was the medical marijuana. That was the law that that voters approved that made medical marijuana legal in California, right? But it left a lot of uncertainty as to cultivation, all the things you're talking about, quality control.
That's correct.
Yeah, I mean the industry was launched in 1996. The Compassionate Use Act, and there for a long time, initially that was crucial because at the heart of it, cannabis, I still believe, is a medicine. It is a medicinal product, regardless of how you're using it. If you're using it to relax at the end of your day, if you're using it because you're in severe pain and you're trying to move away from opioids, both of those things to me are inherently medicinal, medicinal things to take part in. And so I think when the Compassionate Use Act was enacted in 1996, it was a protection for those people who were really, really using it as medicine, and it gave them the ability to access that medicine from somewhere other than just a shady character on the corner, or somebody who just had a bag in their pocket that they were willing to break off for you. It was really just the framework for, I need cannabis. I want to purchase cannabis from somebody I know and somebody I trust, and that built the framework for that. And I think as time went on, and we realized how much of a gray area Prop 215 was, it did allow those players to come in that they're trying to make a quick buck. We see it even today in Prop 64. There's plenty of people coming in, and their sole motivation is money. And so Prop 215 was started for the right reasons, and I think towards the end, there were studies done that showed a good amount of the cannabis available at Prop 215 dispensaries, even some of the larger ones, were in fact tainted with some sort of pesticide or something like that. And so we've seen both sides.
Okay. Well, so like many businesses, right? Like, I mean, quality control is really essential for this to be a successful enterprise for everybody.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
All right. That's great. So Prop 64 was passed in 2016. It made adult use marijuana or cannabis, available as of January 2018, I think it was, right? I'm a history professor by background, so I can't help just getting some of the dates down.
Very nice. Very impressed. You've been accurate as well. There you go.
I have Google. I know how to look up stuff. So that's so that has really led to I guess would it overstate it to say that there's been a flood of interest or new businesses coming in? You're already talking about some of that, Weston. Is there sufficient, regulation in the industry within the state? One question we've already gotten in, somebody asked, how much interaction do you have with there's 3 state licensing authorities, right? And do you have a lot of interaction with them? Are they very active? Are they assuming you're out to do something bad until proven otherwise? Or how is that? That's necessary, I assume, right, for this to work?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good to outline, who those regulatory bodies are, and kind of the structure, the licensing structure currently in California. So as we were saying, Supreme Oak holds a distribution license from the Bureau of Cannabis Control. We also hold a Type 6 manufacturing license that was issued by the California Department of Public Health. And so those are the two regulatory bodies that we deal with directly, the BCC and CDPH. We're, you know, well, we're in the you know, beginning phases of building out Supreme Oak, and so we definitely interact with the BCC first and foremost, the Bureau of Cannabis Control, and as far as I've seen, you know, we use Metric, which is the state track and trace program, to, you know, track all of our products as they get transferred between licenses. And I think the whole state has kind of yet to see how those regulatory bodies are respond to changes in that track and trace program. And so I think they, on their end, are still building out their regulatory system, just like we're trying to build out our, you know, quality control systems and make sure that we're putting out a, you know, solid product.
Yeah,
okay,
I will say there's absolutely there's a good symbiotic communication I see between the BCC as well as the CDPH, and on the cultivation side, the California Department of Farming and Agriculture, CDFA. They, truthfully, a lot of these entities, they want to see us succeed. They understand that this is a new venture for not only the individuals who are trying to catch up to all the regulation and make sure that they're doing everything the right way, and navigating, truthfully, it's a extensive minefield, if you would, of regulation. And, you know, they're also in the process of issuing regulation that, you know, it may sound good, and they probably, you know, I'd say vast majority of the time have good intentions behind it. But when you go to put it into action, it's either almost repetitive, or, you know, we could do things in a little bit of a more efficient as well as compliant way. So it's really important that we have these open line of communications. And I will say, in our experiences, we've been quite fortunate to utilize those and have good lines.
That's great. And I know there's also local efforts to regulate as well, which can be another layer of stuff to navigate, right?
Yeah. So in addition to the BCC, which is the state organization, the Bureau of Cannabis Control, being headquartered out of Oakland, we also deal with the city on a quite regular basis, whether it be the fire department or building department for either fire inspections or building inspections. There's always someone who, you know, has questions or wants to make sure you're doing things right.
Great. So you actually, both of you mentioned at the beginning, your Supreme Oak operates under an equity license venture. I don't know what the term is for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an equity license, or an equity applicant, if you would. There's certain criteria that needs to be met to qualify to be an equity applicant. So some of that criteria that you need to meet is you need to be an Oakland resident, or a previous Oakland resident as of November 5th, 1996, who has lived for either the last 10 or 20 years in specific police beats. These are police beats that have a higher concentration of policing as well as convictions for cannabis-related offenses. The other alternative to that for living in that beat would be to have a Oakland cannabis conviction, non-violent as well, just cannabis-related. You also need to make under a certain threshold of income. So there is a specific threshold of income that you need to be under to meet that equity applicant status. In addition to that, you know, you also have to turn in all your tax returns, a business plan, proof that you would qualify as an equity applicant, as well as do your live scans, fingerprinting, and everything else. So there is absolutely an extensive background check as well as due diligence on the state's part and city's part. But I think as we keep moving forward, you're going to see a vast increase in the equity program, and truthfully, how important I think it is to implement for this industry.
Now, I know Oakland is a center of a lot of this activity, but other cities also have their own equity programs and counties as well, and the rules might vary a bit from locale to locale, right?
Yeah. As far as I know, I believe LA, Los Angeles County is the other one that's currently in the process of building out their equity program. I also think it's important to mention that you know, Robbie and I are, again, we're in the operations department of Supreme Oak. Our CEO is the actual license holder, and he is the one that, you know, we're blessed to be here and be the faces of Supreme Oak for today. But at, you know, at the heart of it is our license holder. We wouldn't have the positions we have if our license holder didn't qualify for the equity program. And the alternative to that, you know, is several $1,000s in licensing fees, you know, typically a big risk in either purchasing or renting from a landlord that knows your business is going to be cannabis related. Those things are things that have to be, if you're not an equity holder, those are things that have to be secured before your license application is even into the city, you know. So we're very lucky to be here and call ourselves the faces of Supreme Oak for, at least for this program.
So yeah, all right. So regulation is really strict. So it's not just sort of a, you know, fly by. So one question somebody has asked here is, you know, so this is legal in California and it's regulated by Oakland and several state agencies, but it's still illegal on the federal level, right? So what sort of conflicts do you guys face because of the lack of, it's not just because the laws contradict each other, but there's probably a lack of interaction between the state and federal authorities, right? So I can imagine that I know banking laws, right? Supply chain. Can you talk about some of the challenges you face in this because of the conflict in these laws?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, there's no doubt under federal law, cannabis is still considered a Schedule I controlled substance. So in terms of getting any relief or understanding from them, there's really not much there at this point in time. Especially like you referred to the banking, that's a perfect example of where we are dealing with that kind of disconnect or discourse between the state level and the federal level is banking. Fortunately, California, in addition, I believe Colorado has also passed the similar legislation where we have the option, if it's a state or state issued financial institution, we can actually bank with them. So if it's a credit union, or anything that doesn't have federal assistance, we are able to bank with them. So there are certain ways to bank, to go around, but yeah, unfortunately, we're not quite at the level where we can go down to, you know, Wells Fargo or Bank of America and open a true business account. That also plays into taxes. So at the end of the year, end of the month, you know, we always have to report our taxes. There's certainly a steep tax structure and hierarchy that we're adhered to. But in terms of getting write-offs and things like that on the federal level, even for a business, unfortunately, we're just not able to do that at this point in time.
So this may be outside of your frame of reference here, but I have two questions related to it. So the IRS then, does it recognize what you do? I mean, can you deduct business expenses for cannabis on the federal level?
So not on the federal level, no. And actually, there's been a couple cases in the news over the past couple of years, which have, you know, I won't make any specific references, but they've actually shed light on that, where certain entities have tried to write off smaller amounts of product that had nothing to do with, truthfully, cannabis, whether it was just paper, printer paper, pens, merchandise, meaning clothing or you know, mugs, like coffee things, little novelty items like that. That they would write off just to try to, you know, get a little something back from. And unfortunately, the IRS said, you know, since that's such a small percentage of your complete business, your business just falls under the complete realm of cannabis, since the other basically 98 to 99% of the business was made up of just pure cannabis related products.
Wow. All right. So then I would assume then the banking system that's backed by the FDIC is also off limits for the same reasons, right?
For the most part, yeah. There is I will say, you know, again, this is a rapidly changing industry, so they're always trying to, you know, figure out a way to work around things and work through things. So, like I said, with these past laws that were passed within the state with certain credit unions, I'm finding very specific credit unions that are FDIC insured but still fall under the protection to work with cannabis businesses. So we're starting to see a slight change in that, but nowhere near where we need to be.
Interesting. Okay, great. All right, so questions are flooding in. So, my job is done. I'm just going to read questions off of here, and you guys can
Yeah.
try to answer them. All right, and I'll try to just pronounce everything correctly, and that'll be my role here. All right, so yeah, there's somebody who is an artist who's listening in, and so I think this question's for Weston, because you mentioned your artistic relationship to cannabis. Can you say more about that?
Absolutely.
Would you mind talking
Absolutely.
about that?
Yeah. I mean, cannabis has been one of those things that, for years and years before the Compassionate Use Act, before Prop 64, people have been singing about it. People have been, drawing on cannabis. There's a whole kind of, underground, smoking glass scene where, we have these beautiful, pipes and bongs and stuff like that, that whole artistic,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
the glass scene has really picked up a lot. I feel that just as somebody who is into, art and doing little projects and stuff like that, cannabis is just one of those things that folds into that, that side of my life really easily. And again, it was prior to my entry into the,
That should clear up in a second, right? All right.
Always something that's, you listen to reggae in your off days and stuff like that, but at work you kind of have to be a different person. And so coming into the cannabis industry, it was so beautiful to come in and just be like, this is who I am, this is the music I listen to, this is the art I'm into. Yeah, come look at my cool, hand blown, glass bong, and to hear other people really listen to you and enjoy that and be able to talk to you about it is very cool. And so it's just awesome that we're able to do that, in a legit business environment now.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. But like, I've also seen that, and I want to shift the conversation a little bit, that, at first when we were developing, Golden Gate developed a intro to cannabis studies course this spring, and we weren't sure what kinds of people who, would be attracted to it. Was it going to be like sort of recreational users who were trying to learn about business, or was it business people who were trying to learn about cannabis? And it turned out to be more that second group. There were certainly a couple of folks in that first group or who straddled that. It's not as though they're incompatible, but it tended to be much more of a business focused group of people who were interested in thinking about this. So there's maybe a creative tension there between what you're describing, Weston, and the very real business questions that come up in what you do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So with that in mind, we've got a couple of questions along those lines that I'd like to ask you. Let's see. So, okay, I'm not sure what that one means. So, let's see. So what do you think about the legal challenges? What are the legal challenges in operating a vertically integrated supply chain and doing so in a manner that helps to offset the negative implications of 280E? Do you know what 280E is?
Yes.
Oh, can you talk about what that is before you answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So 280E is actually a tax bracket that the IRS set up for Al Capone's liquor enterprises at the time. Right. So technically, on the federal level, this kind of circles back to where we were before. That's the realm that we fall under, would be the 280E on a federal level. That being said, when the IRS wrote those laws and that regulation, that was with the intent to put Al Capone out of business, because there's basically no way to sustain a business model under that. So that being said, that is a constant struggle that, especially as a cannabis entity, we're going to be continuing to face. There are certain things that you can do. I think the question was directly related to being vertically integrated, which again, that will certainly help you and put you in a better position to navigate the field in terms of taxes, outsourcing expenses, and overhead. But there's no clear cut and dry way to kind of avoid the 280E mark right now.
I see. So then, so that poses some challenges, I guess, for what you're doing technically, if somebody wanted to go after.
Oh yeah.
Sectors, yeah. Okay.
That's why it's always important, to make sure you got all your I's dotted and T's crossed, and to make sure you work alongside. Definitely have either attorney or counsel on hand. That's another fortunate aspect. I saw there was another question in here about equity for outside investors. I think that's, actually equity, it says equity isn't attractive to outside investors. I don't think that's true at all. I think outside investors should seek equity applicants. Now, it may be a little bit more expensive in the long run if you're looking for your own licensing. Certain aspects of being equity give you a lot of opportunity that just being a general applicant would not. You can pair up with an equity applicant. So as a equity applicant, you get priority licensing. So your license, if your equity, gets pushed right to the top. As a general applicant, that does not happen. The only way you can have that happen is if you are to incubate, which is you basically pay the rent for an equity applicant's business for up to 3 years. So again, that's going to create a little bit more overhead if you're a general applicant, but at the same time, it does put your license into priority status and allow you to kind of get into the marketplace in a much more efficient manner. So there's a whole lot of great opportunities, and specifically in Oakland, I know Weston mentioned about Los Angeles earlier, the equity program down there, which I know they've had a few issues with, but Oakland, they don't actually put a cap on the licenses necessarily that they're going to issue, but they do say that if they are going to issue one general applicant, they are going to match that 1-to-1 ratio with a equity applicant. So they are really trying to uphold the equity model and trying to bring people who have, unfortunately suffered from the industry and from the weaponization or the policing of the communities.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so there's a lot of great opportunities out there, and I would say for investors, equity is a great way to go.
So it's an attempt to redress some of the wrongs that were committed in the past, I guess, some of the injustices.
Absolutely. Yeah. And at the heart of it, equity is access to licensing, so as an investor, I'm looking into, the business model and the business plan. Just getting the license is something that, you assume just happens in any other industry. You apply and you get it. But here, the fact that these equity applicants do have priority, to me, that's a very, very lucrative thing for investors to look at. They're able to focus on the other aspects of their business besides just getting the license in their hands, and so, yeah, I think equity is very attractive to outside investors for sure.
Good. That's great. That makes a lot of sense. So that's, because for so many years, I've seen interviews with people who have, their families have been in this business for decades, and they were always sort of operating outside the law. And now, and I think they've also gone back and sort of avoided criminal penalties that people had in the past. There have been people who've had jail sentences sort of voided and commuted, that sort of thing, as a way to make up for past wrongs.
They're starting that process for sure. Still several people, behind bars, unfortunately, for something that I call my career, but it's it's a step in the right direction for sure.
Well, here's a great question that just came in now. How welcoming are community members to your business? So the people, your literal neighbors in where your business is operating, and what can you do, or what do you do to contribute to sort of equity within the community? How do you contribute to addressing some of the issues in the communities where you operate?
That's a great question, because honestly, I think that's a very important part of this whole thing, is trying to bring up the community and not only better the industry, but better the community which it's in as well. So at Supreme Oak, we take great pride in that. Shout out to Eric Washington, his wife Sonia, and Lee. They are just great individuals, great owners, great people to be a part of and work for. Part of the application process, when we have to put things forward as equity applicants, is actually a regentrification plan for our immediate surrounding areas and blocks. So we've actually, have a 3-year plan to build up and fix I can't give specifics on where we're at, but we are in a heavy industrial area down in Oakland. So there's always a lot of community and cleanup that we're like to do. We also have veteran discounts, senior discounts. We were doing student days for a while there. We give actually a percentage back, cash back. So not to be too marketing, but we always really like to keep the patients and, the individuals in mind, because there's no doubt that once the taxes come in and everything, it can get expensive at times. And unfortunately, there is a slight, disconnect, I feel like, when we switched over to Prop 64 for a lot of the individuals who were using cannabis strictly medicinally. Things, there was certainly a price increase and certain things like that. So hands down, giving back to the community, trying to be about the industry as well. The monetary thing, that always will come. It is a business, but there's so much more to cannabis and the industry than the money.
That makes a lot of sense. No, I know, yeah, a lot of what you're doing is really working in the communities. I've also thought a bit about how the cannabis industry has been trying to change the image it has, because, as we were saying before, as you were saying before, it had these sort of shadier origins, and so some of the equity programs that the state and the city have passed have been to address it. But there's also been just a more on, I don't want to say on the surface, but there's been more of a public relations effort to sort of do a better job of integrating the cannabis industry with the community. And I'm thinking about some of the things, Robbie, you and I talked about not long ago, just the words that we use, the naming conventions, so you don't say marijuana most of the time, you're saying cannabis. And I think one time I was talking about recreational use, and you said, and you didn't correct me, you just said, oh, adult use, and I know that's, can you talk about that, about the sort of how we're thinking about and how we're naming these things and what effect that has?
Yeah. I think, just for starters, it's common knowledge in the cannabis industry that the term marijuana was a term that was popularized by the Nixon administration to really put kind of a quote unquote negative face on cannabis itself. They wanted to bill it as, a Mexican drug, that it was coming up from our borders, it was poisoning our communities and stuff like that. And unfortunately, I think that term marijuana has really stuck in popular culture and stuff like that. So I think it's kind of representational of the current industry that we're trying to refer to it as cannabis due to that, the connotations that existed back in the 60s. And yeah, I think overall, I just the way we think about it today is we want cannabis to be something that is approachable, that people can feel comfortable using, that something that folds well into everyday life. And I think that term cannabis is, to me, just a lot friendlier than the heart, like pot and weed and stuff like that.
Right.
Where we've moved on. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. That's great. And so questions are still flooding in. I'm just saying we're not going to be able to get to all of these. I did want to show something that you all sent me, though, because I think it really speaks to the seriousness of where the industry is heading now. Not just public relations and naming conventions, but really the level of quality control and things like that happen. So I'm actually going to share my screen, and I wonder if you guys could explain to me what we're looking at here. I hope everyone can see this. It says Sunset Sherbet in the upper left corner.
Oh yeah, so this is just a brief. This is a generalized COA, or certificate of analysis. This is just something I kind of wanted to show to a lot of people, just kind of circle back to what we initially touched on about quality control and testing. As you can see in the top left corner, right under Sunset Sherbet there, you have a metric sample number. So those numbers right there, metric sample number, as well as the metric batch number, those are actually going to be specific to each individual batch from the time that the plant, in this specific instance, is harvested or even cultivated, start cultivated, to the time that it's sold on the shelf. So once the consumer makes the purchase, they can actually track that batch all the way back to the beginning of the harvest, see where it was cultivated, who cultivated it. These are the testing percentages, or which a lot of people get hung up on. I will just put that out there. There's a lot more to cannabis than percentages and numbers. So those are important factors, though, definitely, and people like to know about them. So it's good that they have them there. But this is the real highlight that I just wanted. The real reason I wanted to bring this up is what we see down here is the cannabinoids. So in cannabis, there's over 100. I think it's over 120 now, but identified cannabinoids. Primarily those being THC, CBD, that make up the cannabinoid spectrum in the plant. THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, being with a psychoactive effect, which most people are familiar with, which gives you that high feeling. CBD, or cannabidiol, is more of the medicinal aspect, or inflammation, neuropathy, cognitive function, something that's not going to necessarily give you a medicated feeling. But all of these other cannabinoids down here, THCV, CBG, CBN, CBC, CBGA, those are all cannabinoids that we know are there, but we just don't know a lot about. Specific, just another example, CBN, which is a degradation of THC, works great for insomnia, individuals who suffer from severe pain. I knew a lot of Vietnam veterans who had severe traumatic injuries who needed to utilize that. So there's a whole lot of just unknown. And again, I think it circles back to just this first step of shining light and educating a lot of the public behind, some of the challenges that we still face. But there's a whole vast majority of states out there who pride themselves on having a medicinal program, and they don't test for any of these, not even cannabinoids. They don't test for the cannabinoids, but they don't test for any of the heavy metals, any of the basically any of the heavy metals or foreign matters or microbials or pesticides, anything like that, which is kind of, that's mind-blowing to say you're going to have a medicinal program and not really know what medically is being introduced to the patient.
Yeah, and that's to kind of like further on that is, there's also the test results for pesticides, and there's, in addition, a visual test to make sure there's no bug parts or mold or anything like that. There are mold tests as well. For edibles, there's water activity tests, there's homogeneity tests as well that are all included on those certificate of analysis. So the quality control has, we've reached a new level of, it's not just about having cannabis in a cookie that you baked anymore. It's not about just, my brownie contains this X amount of cannabis. We want people to be able to use this medicinally and, recreationally throughout, day-to-day use. But in order to do that, you need to know how much you're putting into your body. And that's exactly what these compliance results are telling us, that
makes
it's not only safe, but what you're putting into your body is exactly what the package says you're putting into your body. And so,
are there other things besides the THC and the CBD that are sort of emerging as new areas of interest?
Cannabis is also a terpene-rich plant. So terpenes are, a diverse group of organic molecules that make up the essence, the smell of a lot of plants throughout nature. And cannabis is found to be, I think, about over 100 different terpenes found in cannabis, depending on the genetics that you're dealing with. And so terpenes themselves have, a litany of uses when they're isolated, and when they're combined with cannabinoids, they will also enhance or, hinder certain medicinal effects and, certain effects on different systems throughout the body. So cannabinoids, terpenes are, kind of go hand in hand. They're definitely synergistic.
Okay. Yeah. And how does the medical community feel about this? Are they embracing this, or, still wait and see, or what's going on with that?
Yeah, I think that goes back to, federal legalization. We need to deschedule cannabis. And right now, it's still a Schedule 1 narcotic on the federal level, and therefore, I believe the DEA is really the only body that's legally able to do mass studies on cannabis. I know that there's been a program at the University of Mississippi for several years that the DEA actually, I believe the DEA sanctions that research. But again, we've seen that at that one, at the University of Mississippi, the plant that they're studying is not representational of the samples that you'll find here in California, where arguably the best cannabis in the world comes from,
Of course, you have
So,
to say that, right?
yeah, of course. But yeah, I mean, it's important to say that, if we're studying it, the science is based around peer review, peer knowledge. We need to be able to criticize each other's studies. And to do that, we need to open up the borders. We need to be able to, have California cannabis be studied at the University of Mississippi. We need researchers from all over the world to be able to collaborate with each other. And I definitely think there's the stigma even within the scientific community of, even talking about cannabis sometimes. So
really,
it's definitely, it's legitimate in certain circles, and there's still plenty of holdouts out there that are waiting for that descheduling to occur.
Absolutely.
Well, all right. So just a couple of questions, because we are about out of time, believe it or not. We could probably stay on for an hour, but people have lives, they have to go on and do. You guys probably work or something. So we've had a couple of questions relating to how do people get involved in the industry. In particular, there were two questions. One was from somebody who's out of state, in a state where it's not legal right now. So are there networks, or are there ways to connect with folks where it is legal or who are advocating for legalization? So that's one question. And then the other question, similar, is there enough representation of an accessibility for people of color to join the business side of cannabis? And what would the opportunities look like there? Because there are probably going to be some disparities no matter what efforts we make to address equity issues, right? So I know those are sort of related but unrelated, but
yeah, no, absolutely. So to the out-of-stater, if you have interest in kind of getting into this industry or learning more about it, there are a number of seminars and actually entities that'll travel and will, have in class almost, or a sit-in. Now with the whole COVID thing, things have kind of changed. But that is an awesome opportunity to network and to meet some individuals who are in it, whether it's a workshop or a conference, anything like that. There's also a lot of websites and portals, as well as just reaching out to individual companies, truthfully. A lot of times there's just so many moving parts in, again, this rapidly evolving industry that, just reaching out and asking sometimes could open so many doors.
Yeah, I think too, again, I don't think the cannabis industry at this point always knows what it wants. And so if you are able to come and advertise yourself and give reason, for why you should come in and work for a company, that typically you don't have to have, 10 years of cannabis experience. You don't have to have hands-on, growers experience or anything like that. We're seeing a lot of industries just in my realm of like inventory control and logistics and warehousing. Those are all things that you can do outside of the cannabis industry that right now the cannabis industry is looking for. We're looking for people that are logistics professionals. We're looking for people that are good at auditing numbers and moving product, throughout the state. There's, security companies. There's a lot of ancillary businesses that are directly related to the cannabis industry that that I don't think have been built out necessarily yet. And so, and I guess just more basic, I got my first job at a dispensary based on the fact that I told the manager, I have a little bit of growing experience. Last year I had a plant in the ground, and I got to see that come to adulthood, and I harvested it, and just being able to be a part of that little experience is sometimes enough to just get your foot in the door, So my takeaway from it is just get into it, be a cannabis person, you know, like just experience it however you are able to experience it. And when the industry comes to your state, it'll be easy to get in because you are, you know, you've had a little bit of experience.
Yeah, we've actually had job fairs at Golden Gate, you know, which were really well attended for all the same reasons you're talking about. You know, although right now I don't know that we'll be able to do that. But yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of interest, and there's great opportunities as you're describing. That's really helpful advice. And then what about investors? Is there a different approach that you would recommend for somebody who's interested in investing in the industry?
So
is that legal, or you know, how does that work even?
Oh, it is legal. I mean, again, you want to make sure that you're investing with a company that has all of its licenses with the state, whether you're in California or whichever state you're in. You want to make sure that they're up to date and they're doing everything above board within their state level. Because, you know, again, you can always invest in the other side of things, and you have no immunity or protection at that sense. But there's absolutely, you know, reaching out to a lot of the companies. There is also portals online where, you know, certain companies will advertise if they're looking for specific specific investors. Also for different types of licensing. So, you know, just to give you an example, we have the Type 6, which is a non-volatile manufacturing license. Then we also have the storefront delivery, or the non-storefront delivery license. So those are two totally different operations, going to require two totally different sources of funding and amounts of funding. And, you know, just two totally different kind of returns as well, to be frank with you. So that's just something else to kind of consider, you know, maybe do a little research in terms of what kind of license would interest you. If you don't really care, then that's also something else to, you know, consider. But yeah, no, there's always, where there's a will, there's a way. And, you know, fortunately you're starting to see a lot more opportunities like this present itself and bring it to the forefront where you can network and try to talk to individuals. But there's, you know, still a lot to do. And unfortunately, this industry too, it is a word of mouth to an extent industry still. You see that. So, you know, talking, networking, and, you know, trying to just be there is one of the more important things.
Oh, that's great. Listen, I know we could talk for a while about this. There's a lot to discuss, and because this is expanding, not just in the Bay Area and the state of California, but I know a lot, you know, it's legal in Canada, you know, and there have been folks from Canada who've been learning the trade and coming to the States or other countries as well where that's legal. I'm going to put in the chat your contact info, because I know you're cool with people getting in touch with you.
Yeah,
so just put that there. And there's also a link to one of your websites, which is the Mary and Joe Shop website, right? And so folks, there's a blog there, I think, and some other information. I really want to thank you both for taking the time to talk about this today. There's obviously so much more, and there are a lot of questions. All right, now there's still 14 questions left in here. So that's
hardly scratching the surface.
Yeah, we're not even,
but
maybe we'll have to do a part 2 on this here. Yeah, because it seems like there's all kinds of interest. We should probably offer a course on this or something. You know, that might be helpful.
I think that would be a great opportunity for a lot of people who have interest in exploring it, you know?
Yeah, we can do that again. But anyway, so Weston, Thatcher, thanks very much. Robert Sintich Jr. from both from Supreme Oak and doing some other kinds of consulting right now. I've really gotten a lot out of this, and I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us. So this will be posted for folks. Yeah, no, my pleasure. This will be posted on GGU's YouTube channel shortly, once we are able to get to it. You know, we're busy. But probably in a couple days. And you can find this, and then please refer people to it. We're going to have more episodes of this talk show, Back to the Basics, coming up in the next couple weeks, and we'll announce our guests as soon as we can. So thanks very much. And I also want to thank Joyce Martin, our producer, for helping us with like really crucial technical support. So thank you.
Thank you, Joyce.